Today in this video, I want to showcase some of the trinkets in Season 3, specifically for the Brewmaster Monk. Now, this is going to, translate into other tanks and other, maybe some melee or agility-based DPS, but for the most part, I just want to kind of geek out about how good the trinket pool is in next season. So what I really like is that the new trinkets from the raid are fairly thematic. Now, don't worry, I'm going to go over dungeon trinkets as well. But if you happen to raid, there's going to be some really good ones you can get, and some of them come from some pretty early bosses, so chances of pugging it, based on tuning, it might be pretty easy for you to get your hands on. So Manaforge-Omega is the new raid. It's going to be an 8-boss raid, and the first trinket you're going to see actually is going to come off the second boss, Lumathar. Now, this is the Astral Antenna. I believe this is available for just agility. Actually, it should be available to pretty much all specializations, which is super nice. So if you happen to get this trinket, you can, if you play all 3 specs, you can kind of jump around between the 3. Now, what this does is it's a agility stat stick, or I guess a main stat stick, followed by the chance for you to gain 6,000 critical strike for 10 seconds. And so the way that this trinket works is kind of interesting. Upon entering combat, I'm not sure how long it'll take, but basically it's a random proc, and it'll actually show like little antennas over your head, which is kind of cute, I guess. And once it procs, you're going to suck an orb towards you. It's kind of similar to the Soul-Eating Ruby from Theater of Pain in Season 2, where once it spawns, you can kind of kite it out almost if you need to, which was the strategy way back in the day. I'm waiting for this thing to proc while I'm talking. Now, the one thing I've noticed about this trinket is the proc rate is actually pretty low. I'm not sure if this is intended. It gives a ton of crit when it does happen to proc, and it can stack, so you can kind of high roll getting 2 procs back to back, but chances are you're generally only ever going to see a 6k stat increase from it, but there have been cases where you get more than that. I'm not sure if the trinket is just bugged or what's going on. I've been in combat for nearly a minute now, and I still have not seen the trinket. Oh, there it is. So you're going to see I have a little butterfly antenna thing above my head, and this orb is now following me, and it's following me for another 10 seconds or so. And so when this is proccing, you can kind of kite it out and then absorb it to get that big critical strike of 6,000. Now, I have seen this proc back to back. It does say in the trinket tooltip that multiple applications may overlap, so it is possible that you actually can get more, but this trinket is pretty good. It's not the best. It does come from the second boss. What I like about it is that it's fairly universal, meaning that you can use it for all 3 kind of specializations. Oh, it just procced again while I was running away. So it does proc, I don't know, maybe once a minute is like from what I've been able to experience, but when it does proc, it's a good hefty bit of crit. Now, from the 3rd boss of the raid, we're actually seeing a tank trinket, which is kind of, I don't want to say rare, but kind of rare. Normally when we've been seeing these trinkets come really deep in the raid, as in the tank trinkets. But from the 3rd boss, Soulbinder Nazandiri, I guess that's it. He drops Soulbinder's Embrace. And this is also an agility and also a strength stat stick, so all tanks can utilize this. The on-use effect has a 1-minute cooldown. And how it reads is activate the soul shield to unleash a shockwave dealing arcane damage to all nearby enemies and reduce your damage taken by 50% for 20 seconds or until 4.5 million damage has been prevented. Now, the way these tooltips end up working is that the modifier for the total absorb is based on a versatility multiplier. So if you happen to be a tank that stacks a lot of versatility like Brewmaster Monk does, you're going to get a little bit more, I guess you're going to get a little bit more stats, or a bigger absorb from this trinket. So what's nice is it does damage, it's an on-use, it's a 1-minute cooldown, and it gives you a nice fat absorb. So if I come up to these mobs and I hit this trinket, you can see that it kind of does like this pulsing shockwave in 360 degrees around your character. You gain this super cool, prismatic, arcane looking barrier around yourself. On my Brewmaster right now, it is absorbing 8.3 million damage, which very strong on a 1-minute cooldown. We've seen similar trinkets to like this back in Dragonflight, like with Treemouse Festering Splinter or Talisman of the Crag Shaper. But what I like about this trinket is not only does it do damage, but it's a 1-minute cooldown. Having a 1-minute defensive option in your kit makes most tanks really strong, and it allows you to cover those windows where you might need an extra defensive, whether you're a paladin or a warrior or a brewmaster or a blood DK. Having a 50% DR on a 1-minute cooldown is always good for Mythic Plus and for Raid Prog. Now the next trinket that we're going to look at is from Forge Weaver Araz, which is the supposedly 4th boss of the raid. He gives a trinket that instead of giving main stat, gives critical strike and has a big 2-minute on use that gives you a massive amount of main stat. And it comes at the cost of 15% of your maximum health, so kind of a little kiss curse trinket here. Now this trinket is usable by all specializations, and what I like about this is it's similar, or at least gives similar vibes to Signet of the Priory. Obviously Signet of the Priory seems like a much worse trinket in comparison to this, but this is going to give us a whopping almost 50,000 main stat, which will then decay at about 1,500 a second for 30 seconds, only for 15% of our max health, which isn't too bad. So for Brewmaster specifically, this is going to come in to play probably more often when you're playing Master of Harmony, when you're playing a no CDR build on your Weapons of Order. So what you're going to do is you're going to end up pairing this with Weapons of Order, and it's going to do, obviously, it's going to make your abilities do a ton of damage. So for example, we'd probably pop Weapons of Order, and with this, we'd probably activate the Trinket, which does this cool kind of like casting animation at the start, and then it's going to make our abilities just absolutely crank, and it's going to deplete over time. So right now we're at 30,000-ish, give or take. Now we're at 28,000, 27,000, 25,000. So it's going to be a little bit more front-loaded. Oh, and there's the antenna, or the antenna coming back in. So you can also save to bank it with that. But overall, I think it's a pretty cool trinket, and it has a really cool casting animation. It's not even a cast. It's just like, it's an instant on use, but it like makes your character hover for a second, doing some cool like arcane animation. I'm a big fan. It's very thematic. I think it's going to pair well a lot with anyone who's interested in playing Master of Harmony. The only problem I would like probably foresee is that it's probably going to be good for most DPS classes, especially those who have 2-minute cooldowns. So you can make the argument for things like Windwalker, Destro Lock, Mage Specializations, Boomkins. I'm sure most casters, as well as like 2-minute DPS classes like Demon Hunter, are probably going to want to get this trinket. So getting it might be a little difficult, but if you can get your hands on it, it seems like it's going to be really powerful. So next we have the Soul Hunters, and I've heard rumors that this is an optional boss in the raid, but you're definitely going to want to kill it for a lot of reasons. Obviously for the boots, which have a special effect, which increase the effectiveness of your wraps, which is going to be an artifact cloak we're going to have this next patch. But the reason why you're going to want to kill this boss, well, first, it gives you shoulder item for tier set, but also the brand of Ceaseless Ire. Now this trinket is really, really cool. So it's a passive trinket. And how it reads is taking damage infuriates you, causing you to absorb 100k damage and deal 200k shadow damage per infuriation split between your nearby enemies. Damage increased by 30% per additional enemy up to 150%. You may be further infuriated every 15 seconds, stacking up to 15 times, but calm quickly after leaving combat. So the way that this reads ends up being fairly similar to something like Eye of Kazan, where while you're in combat, you're going to be gaining stacks, and those stacks will deal and also absorb more damage. And then as you leave combat, those stacks will drop. So the way that this ends up working is that I'm going to be attacking this mob here, and you're going to see this like fractured shield that's going to show up. And it gets absorbed really quickly because it's not absorbing that much damage. Now, this is probably a tooltip just kind of filler right now, but it's called Infuriated. And it's going to stack up every 15 seconds. And so as you can see, I just got another shield there. It's going to get absorbed, and then when it bursts, it also does a bit of damage. I don't know if it's doing damage when it is gained or if it leaves or once it expires, but basically it's just a totally passive thing. You're going to see I'm going to have the shield that I'm going to gain. It's going to go away, but every time this is happening, it's also doing a fair bit of damage. I'm going to try to show it off here. It's going to be hard because there's so many things happening right now and I don't have details enabled, but right here, Brand of Ceaseless hit for 1 mil. Now this doesn't seem like a lot, but the more stacks I gain here, the harder and harder this is going to hit. And it also does AoE damage. So it ends up actually being pretty big in like AoE situations. But it's proccing a lot. Another 1.2 million hit there, which is pretty solid. I'm just kind of hitting buttons right now. But yeah, this is kind of like a nice little passive stat stick trinket. Not even stat stick trinket. It does give critical strike. And it gives you just constant absorb shields that are mitigating a fair bit of damage. So yeah, I like this trinket a lot. It's hard to tell if this is going to be truly like good until we can actually do mythic dungeon testing. When you're hitting a training dummy, the only thing I can really tell is that it's absorbing a bit of damage and it's dealing a bit of damage. The shields are going to be pretty small, but it seems like it procs like 4 times a minute, which is really, really nice. Certain situations where this trinket's going to be great is going to be like late prog fights or maybe early prog fights. So like as you start seeing further and further, you're going to be stronger and stronger. In Mythic Plus, it's yet to be seen. Similar to this season with Eye of Kazan, we're going to have to figure out ways to try to maintain combat. So what we'll do here is I'll leave. And what you'll see is once I actually get out of combat here, sometimes these training dummies are a little weird. I'm going to run really far, and you're going to see now it's going to start depleting every like 3 seconds or so. It's going to go down a stack. I don't think there's a world where it ever just falls off completely. Because right now I've been out of combat for almost, I don't know, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. It's still at 4. Now it's at 3. So it does go down really slowly. I'm going to imagine it's going to have a different icon than this cogwheel. This is generally like a filler or temporary kind of like placeholder, I guess. But yeah, really cool trinket. I really like this one. I really hope it's not an optional boss because it's one of those things where it's like, if it's optional, how many people are going to skip it? Is it based on tuning? I hope players don't skip it, and I hope specifically my guild doesn't skip it because this is a trinket that I definitely want to get my hands on for this next season. All right, so unfortunately nothing drops from Fractilis, or Fractilis, but Nexus King Shelhadar drops the Perfidious Projector, this thing. So this is a kind of a beans trinket in my opinion, but we're going to talk about it really quick. So what it does is it's an on use. It is a stat stick of haste, not main stat. And when you use it, it does 7.2 million cosmic damage split between all enemies. And it does more damage based on the amount of enemies hit. And so this is a 2-minute cooldown. It's probably fine for like damage. I think it's really going to come to tuning numbers. I'm sure it's a trinket that people might run in raid just because it's just an on-use damage effect, which is nice. But there's no cast time, and how it's going to work is I'm going to spawn a little guy to my back right, and then it's going to do a bunch of like Nyack, Nexus Princess, Kaiveza kind of dashes through the targets you're hitting. So I'm going to throw a keg here. When I use the trinket, this guy's going to spawn. He's going to command an army, and they're just going to start slamming. And that's it. Nothing too crazy. If we pull up the combat log here, you're going to see that it's the Shadow Guard. To me, that's what the effect is. And it does, 1.5 million criticals. It hits a lot, as you can see here. It did a ton of damage. I can't do quick math in my head, but it's probably close to 10 mil, I would say. Ish, kind of, maybe. So it's going to be good for high crit-based tanks. Most tanks play a lot of crit in raid scenarios. This is probably where this trinket's going to be used. Now, it is haste as a stat stick, which isn't super good for Brewmaster. So unless the damage tuning on this is really, really, really high, I can't imagine a world where we run this unless the tuning on the actual trinket's damage is also really, really high. All right, last but not least, we have Dimensius, the All-Devouring. Now, unfortunately, he does drop a good trinket, which we'll see, because I actually don't know how good this trinket really is. It's similar. Maybe I'll try to compare it to like Firax's Rageheart from Dragonflight. Now, it doesn't have any type of similar effect at all, but like it is probably pretty good and you're going to want it. So it does give versatility as its stat stick. Now, what it does is when you equip it, taking damage has a high chance to cause you to devour the essence of nearby enemies, dealing shadow damage split between them and healing you for 150% of the damage dealt. So this might end up being very good for tanks that don't often sit at max health. So Brewmasters probably are really going to like this trinket. I can imagine that Guardian Druids also might like this trinket. But beyond that, fatal damage not exceeding 17.4 million health, which I'm assuming is going to be near our max health, restores you to 10% health and reconstitutes you as unstable void for 6 seconds, exceeding 75% health to stabilize and avoid death. This effect may occur once every 8 minutes. The heart is unable to deal damage while recharging. So, this trinket is going to do a lot of damage. As I'm sitting here hitting these mobs, actually this isn't going to work because it's based on me taking damage. This trinket can proc off of stagger. Actually, you know what? I think maybe I should So that little kind of suck animation is what is the trinket proc. I'll try to point it out here. So not this. This is the other trinket we were showing off, the Ceaseless Ire. But as I'm taking damage, it's like gonna radiate this pulse, and then you're gonna see like an essence getting consumed into me, which is pretty sick. And as you can see, it procs a lot. It can proc off of stagger, it's procking off the melees, and it's procking off the uber strike. And then every time this is happening, you're gonna notice my health pool. It's going down. It's obviously gonna go down really slow. I'm trying my best not to heal, but when it finally does proc, it's gonna pretty much top me off. And so whenever it does proc, that damage it's dealing, I'm leeching for, and then it's also benefiting from Celestial Fortune. So this trinket is like kind of stupid. It's stupid good. Of course, there's a cheat death component to it, but I would say it's probably one of the worst cheat deaths we've ever gotten, because essentially what it is it's like purgatory. Now I'm gonna try to let this guy kill me to show you what it looks like. You have basically 6 seconds to top yourself or get yourself above 75% health, and it doesn't give you any kind of damage reduction or anything like that. It heals you to 10%, and then it's up to you to get to 75% health. And you have 6 seconds to do so. So basically it's like purgatory for the DK, except it's double the cooldown. And as a brewmaster specifically, you don't have agency to top yourself that quickly, especially if you end up playing a new talent. Like Nizau's Resolve. So maybe one day it'll actually kill me. It's every time this shit procs, it's just it's leeching because I'm taking damage from stagger, and so I'll be trying to die here, and it's just gonna keep healing me over and over again. Obviously, this is a training dummy, but just like this alone, guys, kind of goes to show how powerful these two trinkets can be in a scenario where you just need a lot of passive healing. And added benefit, it's also doing a ton of damage. Brand of Ceaseless Ire is hitting for 3.2 mil now. So here we go. I'm getting nice and low here, which is nice. And bang. Maybe? There we go. So now I have 6 seconds to top myself. But as you can see, I'm still taking damage. And then if you don't top yourself, you die and you become just an essence of void lingering with your with your weapons out. And hey, there's a city pup. So all in all, those are all the trinkets from the raid specifically for Brewmaster. Now, of course, there's a couple of different like Windwalker trinkets. I don't really care to talk about them as much. Actually, are there even? I guess there's this Sigil of the Cosmic Hunt. Your attacks will do damage. Again, this is a DPS trinket, so good luck trying to get it unless you're playing with like a set group. So I'm not going to talk about some of these trinkets here because they are meant for damage dealers. But I'm very excited. I think not only are these trinkets extremely cosmetic or thematic, I should say, they're so good. It's such a good arsenal for raid players. And I think anyone who does raid and Mythic Plus is going to have a really good time this season. Now, of course, I definitely understand if you're not a raider, but let's talk about some of the seasonal trinkets because the dungeon pool is kind of goated. I'm going to talk about this in a separate video because there's a lot I want to share about the dungeons, but we voted for 4 of the dungeons that are returning next season. We are seeing 2 of the Season 1 dungeons and 2 of the Season 2 dungeons. Now, while I'm not super happy to see Priory return, it's kind of good that it is, because Priory offers Signet of the Priory, a very good trinket for the Brewmaster Monk specifically, pretty good alternative on use trinket for a lot of 2-minute cooldown classes that needed big stats on paired with their CDs, of course. And then if you're playing Brewmaster, of course, we have Tome of Light's Devotion. This is an crazy good, and if the tuning kind of remains for next season, is probably still going to be a very good, solid single target option for raid specifically, or for like low keys. And of course, you have Signet of the Priory, which is a trinket that pairs very well with the Master of Harmony no CDR build, which has been very popular in Season 2 of The War Within. Operation Floodgate. You're going to see the improvised Sephorian Pacemaker make a return, along with the Ringing Ritual Mud, a fan favorite among most tanks, or specifically Brewmaster players, and specifically myself, because I love this trinket. There's so many good uses for it. Not only is it a massive absorb, but it also does a little bit of damage, and on top of that, it's really nice having a trinket that has cooldown reduction based on dots. So there's niche times that it's better or worse in different situations. So for example, for Swamp Face, you're taking periodic damage the entire time, therefore this trinket is like a 1-minute cooldown. In Prior of the Sacred Flames, Captain Dale Cries Bleed. Very, very, very good here. Even in the raid this last season, Gallywix has so many different dots on this fight, especially on Mythic and Heroic, that this trinket, close to, if not less than a 1 minute cooldown. Very good trinket. So all of those will be making a return. In Dawnbreaker, we had the Empowering Crystal of a New Bocage. This is a very, very powerful stat stick that gives you random secondary stats. This has pretty high uptime. If I recall from Season 1, it was around 35 to 40% uptime. Yes, it could proc haste, which wasn't super great for the brew, but mastery, verse, or crits, all very strong kind of options for secondary stat procs. And it's just a nice little stat stick you don't have to worry about. And of course, Arakara, we had the Harvester's Edict and Swarm Gland. I could imagine Blizzard might do some tuning to these to try to bolster them up based on how often they were represented. But we have Sackbird returning. And while Sackbird isn't like the best trinket ever, it was generally over budgeted or highly budgeted because it would actually give more main stat than most other trinkets. So still really powerful option early on in the season. Also, it's really good for like Windwalker and stuff. So good trinket. Now, when it comes to the new stuff, unfortunately, or the returning dungeons, they don't have the Ecodome stuff available for testing on the PTR. From what I can tell, I couldn't find them on any of the vendors, but we're getting 2 trinkets from here. Now, I'm not super ecstatic about these. First, we have the Incorporeal Warp Claw. This just has your melee attacks being able to do damage. Now, of course, if this is tuned really well, it's going to be a very solid stat stick option, especially if you pair it with like Tome of Light's Devotion, for example. What I like about this trinket, though, is that at least it gives main stat. So as long as the damage on it is tuned okay, it actually might be pretty good. And then you have Lily of the Eternal Wake, or Weave. Oops. Next, you have Lily of the Eternal Weave. This is an on use on a minute 30, and it borrows fates from those around you, increasing your mastery by 8,000 for 15 seconds. Chances are this is more of like a Windwalker trinket than anything. If you have it and you have nothing else to use, it's probably going to be pretty okay, but I would say this is probably one of the weaker trinkets for Brewmaster in this next season. Unfortunately, Halls of Atonement doesn't have any trinkets for at least the Brewmaster spec. The Cursed Stone Idol, was this a thing back in the day? I don't remember this being a thing back in the day, but this is a Windwalker trinket that you channel for 1 second to invoke the Wrath of the Idol, increasing your crit by 13,000. The force slams the earth, dealing big nature damage to all enemies, and increase the critical strike by 800 per enemy hit, up to a maximum of 16,000. This is a minute and a half cooldown. Probably not terrible if you can get it. Is because it's a dungeon, it's probably a little bit easier to just like roll DPS spec and like get your hands on it. Crit's super nice for Brewmaster for a lot of reasons. With it being a shorter cooldown of around the minute 30, it could also be fairly decent for like Shado-pan with CDR on Weapons of Order. But yeah, pretty good. Not too shabby. And last but not least, we have my favorite dungeon of all time, Tazavesh. This is going to be split into 2 dungeons. I'm assuming it's going to be the same as the first 5 in the streets and the last 3 in Gambit. Now, what is pretty dope about this dungeon is it offers a lot of good trinkets. Specifically, for the Brewmaster, we have both the Codex of First Technique and Soleia's Secret Technique. Now, Codex is going to come from streets, so it's the first 5. It's going to come from Soasmi. Now, this trinket, back in the day, got a lot of like hate from kind of the Theorycraft Simlords because it's a stamina trinket. This stamina generally won't benefit you unless you have like percentage-based healing effects. This is very feel crafty, but when you have increased health pool, your percentage-based healing effects, so for example, like Frenzied Regeneration or Renewal or Last Stand. I guess Last Stand is like based on the health increase as well. But basically, if you have or Impending Victory, great one, you're going to get more healing out of these. More healing is generally going to equal-ish more survivability. Also, when you take damage with this trinket, you gain an absorb that reflects, it's like a 10% give or take DR, but it doesn't just absorb the damage, but it reflects it back at the attacker. Now, what was interesting about this trinket is it had a lot of interesting uses. Not only did it act as like a decent defensive and a decent offensive trinket, but when it would proc, and if you targeted something that was like 80 yards away from you, it would actually deal the damage based on the thing you were targeting. And so you're able to like pull mobs from far distances. Now, oftentimes this was a bug, and it was an accidental thing that would like end up wiping your group. But some players found a way to kind of strategically use this trinket to pull trash through walls or from obviously a very far distance to like group mobs up quickly or get pulls gathered. But this trinket returning is going to be pretty nice if you can get it from your vault or from a mythic run. I'm not saying it's the best thing ever and it's your best in slot. It is a stamina trinket and I recognize that, but a very good defensive trinket nonetheless. And lastly, from Soleil, you have Soleia's Secret Technique. This was at the time one of the better stat stick trinkets you could get. Basically how it works, it's an on use, and the on use is kind of like you bind with someone. So you select a random player and you give them some of your highest secondary stat, but it also gives you that same stat. So let's say if I had it on my Brewmaster, I would probably give the player versatility. I'd give them 270, and then I would also gain another close to 2,000 on top of also having a main stat stick. So this was a very powerful trinket back in the day because a lot of classes just liked having good stats. But it's a good trinket nonetheless. Even if it's tuned a little bit lower, if you happen to get your hands on this, it's not terrible. And that just about wraps it up. I believe I've covered all of the dungeon and raid trinkets for this next season. Of course, there's a handful of trinkets that are going to come from delves that can be powerful. I haven't seen many sims yet for the new trinkets, so I will keep an eye out if anything stands out in that case. But the new raid trinkets and the returning dungeon pool is looking really good. So I'm pretty excited. Anyways, let me know what trinket you're most excited about, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.